papers this morning. We're joined by the CEO of the Diana Awards, Tessie Ojo, and the political editor of the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson. A warm welcome to both of you on this Monday morning. Thanks for joining us. Tessie, you want to start with The Guardian this morning. We were just talking about it in the bulletin there, and this is the rebels piling in on the Prime Minister over the benefits real-term cuts. It feels as though a U-turn is in the offing, doesn't it?
Yes, but I'm just thinking, why are we even here? Like, you know, the research shows that almost extra 450,000 people will be put in poverty if we do not get this right. And I just think we shouldn't even be here. We shouldn't be here. Like, we are the 5th wealthiest nation in the world, and yet we have people who are in full-time employment and still need food bank. We have a whole generation who are going to be pushed into poverty, and it just blows my mind that we are still, you know, talking about having cuts or trying to, what was the word that was used? Operating benefit in line with earnings rather than inflation. I just think that we can do better as a country. We can definitely do better.
Yeah, Nigel, make it make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think she will U-turn. If she doesn't, we're all heading for a general election, because this is the hill that Tory MPs are prepared to die on. I was up in Birmingham at the conference and talked to a load of them, and they're all saying, look, even if we bring the government down, even if we have to face a general election and get a wipeout, we are not going to vote for this. So on the basis of that, if she doesn't change tack, then probably it's all over. And it's the right thing to do. I think that Tess is absolutely right, that it was mad. They've made a promise that they would actually uprate benefits in line with inflation. Quite clear it's necessary. To halve that figure was just never on.
And why did she halve that figure? Just
save money.
To try and save money.
Yeah, basically. I mean, if you can link it to earnings rather than inflation, you say, yeah, you save a huge amount of money. I mean, you are talking about sort of 4 million universal credit claimants. So it's quite a lot of dosh that actually they would bring back. But what they're meant to be doing is solving the cost of living crisis. Absolutely. That was what the mini-budget was meant to be about, not to give tax cuts for millionaires. It was to actually do that. They haven't done that. Tory MPs are really angry about this. This is what they were there to promise to do, and that's why I think she's got to turn back.
Okay, and do you expect that to happen imminently, today or this week, or when do you think we'll get some sort of...
I think that, well, she doesn't actually have to do anything until the 19th.
But the longer she leaves the question mark out, I mean, in every interview I've seen her do recently, she's sort of said, decision hasn't been made.
That's
right.
Would
you read to mean, I'm going to U-turn on this, but I'm not ready to talk
Well,
about
I mean, I think that she can get, that's her kind of get-out-of-jail-free card. That it's not a U-turn technically, because she's quite right. Decision not made. On October the 19th, decision will be made, and if she makes the right one, then her premiership carries on for a little bit longer.
Yeah, Tessie does show that she's listening. That's what she said. I listen to people, and that's a good thing, right?
That's a good thing, but we treat this government, this current government, like it's a different government from the one we had 12 years ago. It's not. It's the same. We shouldn't be here in the first place. We should have got it right. We saw what happened during the pandemic. We saw that actually everyone's pressed. Everyone wants something different. The act of listening shouldn't just be happening just now. We could have got this right. This was meant, as Nigel said, to be a mini budget that helped. But what it's done is push people further into poverty.
Yeah.
And that's just.
Well, I suppose her argument also is that growth eventually helps everybody to become better off, and that is what she's pushing for, and you have to make these difficult decisions along the way. But Whitehall waste is becoming one of the big issues for them, Nigel. This is in the Mirror, your paper, well, your weekday version of your paper. Tories waste £4 billion on botched projects. So
yes,
what's those?
Not new. The government often wastes a lot of money, especially the MOD. They're not mentioned in this one because they always buy the wrong missiles that don't fit the other bits of it and things like that. What this is $4 billion, which could have obviously gone on other things. It would pay, for instance, for a 1p tax cut on basic rate for a year. What the Mirror is saying, it's $1 billion of fraud and error at the business department. That was all our COVID support stuff, and a lot of that money went to the wrong places. We then go down a bit to almost the ridiculous ones, which is we've lost 8 million getting rid of those old burgundy passports because we wanted blue ones that were more British than the old EU ones. My understanding was they'd let those burgundy ones run out before we turned over to the blue ones. But certainly, last passport I got, which was about a year ago, had a blue passport. And there's another £800,000 lost because we bought air tickets to remove migrants, and of course we couldn't send them to Rwanda. So an awful lot of waste here. I mean, this is a constant kind of refrain that what they need to do, obviously, is police this much better. Equally, targeting waste like this is much better than cutting back on departmental spending. What Liz Truss has threatened to do is to cut budgets by 10% of the various government departments. That will hurt people. Better to save money.
Tessie, we always hear this, don't we, about the cutting back on bureaucracy and waste and middle management. It's something that politicians constantly hammer at time and time again, and they never seem to get. Nothing changes.
Absolutely. I would have loved to see this government come on and say, actually, we're going to focus on efficiency. That's how to begin to improve our economy, right? If we get, I mean, if you think about, let's flip back to the COVID and all of the different waste that happened there when we were thinking about, what was that buying different materials, PPE, that's right, and the truckload of PPE that arrived and was the wrong type, and all of that. If we want to, even businesses across the country are looking at how can we be more efficient, how can we be more effective, how can we cut prices. Well, we want the government to lead the way. We don't want to see stories like this, because stories like this just tells us that if you do not get your house in order, why are you trying to get the country in order?
Let's turn our attention to Boris Johnson possibly making a comeback, according to Nadine Dorries. She said, don't rule it out, but I was also reading this in a few papers over the weekend, the suggestion that Rishi Sunak's been having chats behind the scenes, that Boris Johnson reportedly saying perhaps it's too soon, he wants to go and make some money first.
What's
the article in the Times saying this morning?
Yeah, Boris Johnson is comparatively very poor on the basis of being Prime Minister, so he wants to get a few million in his pocket.
He'll have no problem doing that, I'm sure.
Well, probably not, no. I mean, he just goes on the lecture circuit.
Yeah,
writes
he's been writing his memoirs, hasn't he? Well.
I think a Johnson comeback, whatever Nadine says, is probably pretty unlikely. I mean, the impression at the moment is that again, talking to MPs at the conference, they were clutching at straws. It was things like, how do we get rid of Liz Truss? How do we do it by bypassing the party membership, which would infuriate the party membership? But ideas came up where you actually get MPs to decide the next leader, like the old system, rather than put it out to the party membership. Of course, the party membership would be furious about that if they were sidelined, and they're the ones, the 170,000 of them, they're the ones who go out, do the work, they do the canvassing in the rain and put the leaflets through the door.
Well, maybe they can be included in some way, deciding the first round or whatever.
The argument from the MPs is they got the wrong leader. The MPs voted for Rishi Sunak. The party membership decided differently, as everyone expected them to do if Liz Truss got to the final two. And as I say, they were clutching at straws, looking at ways of how can we bypass them, but really difficult.
But I mean, it's the MPs who ousted Boris Johnson, and now there's clamours for him to come back.
I'll just say, can we just have an election, please? I mean, I think I did a tweet a couple of days ago saying, all of the crises that we are experiencing right now, if we look at 20-somethings, 20, 21-year-olds, they never voted. They didn't have the opportunity to vote because they were probably just coming up to 18, were just not old enough. Can we just allow them to have a say in what's happening right now? And let's stop this in-housing, this back and forth. Like, let's just stop it, please. And I mean, that's my view. My view is, there's so much going on right now. We have an entire generation of growing adults who didn't vote because they were just not old enough. There's so many decisions that need to be made right now. I just think let's go to an election
put it to the people.
100%. And get away from this party members. Let's just take it to the people. And
GBViews at gbnews.uk if you think we should have an election. Also, Tessie, front page of the Mail. A coronation fit for a cut-price king, right? How do you feel about that? Do you like? Were you looking forward to a coronation with all the bells and whistles? Or?
I'm sure there'll still be bells and whistles, by the way.
I'm sure that.
Well, less bells and whistles.
I don't think we're going to be axing those in our, what is it?
You know,
Fewer bells and
I
whistles.
think that, you know, we are in a very difficult period, and I think that anything that reflects the mood of the nation, anything that reflects actually the fact that we are in a crisis, will be welcomed by the entire nation. And I think we can do things without losing the very thing that makes us British, the very thing that makes us unique in celebrations. We can do all of that, but on a budget.
Yeah, he's a listen king, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's listening.
Yeah, I think that it's absolutely right. That there is a lot of people are suffering. All he's talking about is taking down the numbers of guests from 8,000 to 2,000. 2,000 is quite a lot for a party. So on the basis of that, I think that he's on the right track here.
Yeah, yeah. And what about catering? He could cut
What
slip
about
down on
catering?
that.
Fast
Just have a DJ.
Yeah, I don't think you sort of rushed onto McDonald's at the end of it. I think you need
But I
to
think if you
have a proper
considerably
feast.
cut down numbers already, that slashed your catering costs, right?
Exactly.
That's true.
8,000 down to 2,000 is significant,
That
isn't it?
is
In terms
true.
of
Yeah.
4 hours down to 1. I mean, do we really want to sit through 4 hours of a coronation? That poor old queen.
Well, they don't
when
happen
she
every
had-
day.
We sat through the funeral.
Several.
That was quite long, and I think that was a tremendous event. It was a historic event. So are coronations. I think an hour is probably a bit short. I mean, perhaps we could go to 2 hours. 2 hours I can manage.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, okay.
So I wonder, actually, slimming that down by an hour, so does that mean that, I can't remember who conducts it, but they're going to have less words to say?
Yeah, a lot
I
of
make
things.
you king, and then
Yeah.
he sticks it on his head. And then
Yeah, I think
bang.
you have to do, constitutionally, you have to go through the coronation vows.
Yeah.
But all the bits on the side they could get rid of,
Yeah, that was the very slimmed down version, by the way. Right.
Should we talk about? Should we talk about Putin? He's calling this bridge blast an act of terrorism. Of course, it's devastating for him because it links him to his annexed Crimea. But you know, the irony of it all. It was on the front of the Telegraph this morning. I mean, for him to be calling things acts of terrorism.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a nerve, really.
Yeah, well, no surprise.
The whole thing is that he's invaded Ukraine. There's a war going on, although no responsibility has been claimed for this attack on the Crimea Bridge. It's an act of war, and if you're in a war, an act of war is right. The idea of actually then suggesting it's terrorism is rather on the lines of suggesting that by the Germans, the French resistance during the war were terrorists. I mean, there was a war going on. The danger, I think, here is what Vladimir Putin does in retaliation. And that's the more serious side and the thing that we actually
Well,
need
we've
to worry
already
about.
seen this attack on Zaporizhia and lots of people dead, including children there. And as you say, just the rhetoric growing up and building up. And we heard from Robert Fox, didn't we, in the last few moments, saying that this could be a new kind of escalation in terms of attacking infrastructure, like we've seen with Nord Stream, but also with communications, and in which case, the West will be forced to sit up at some point and realise, because suggesting we were sort of sleepwalking into all of this.
Yeah.
Very worrying situation there.
Yeah. Just finally, we'll be talking about this later on in the programme, actually. Nigel, front of the Mail or page 2, is Suella, as in the Home Secretary, set to make cannabis a Class A drug?
This seems to be what she wants to do. It just seems to be a bit out of kilter with the rest of the world. I mean, America is now talking about downgrading it rather than the upgrade that she's
America's also talking about banning abortion, so we don't necessarily have to follow what America does.
No, I mean, we don't have to, but I mean, what it would mean is that rather than 5-year maximum terms for possession, you'd end up with 7 years. I think there needs to be a full debate about drug use in this country. Do we make it a public health issue, or do we keep it a criminal issue?
I mean, we've had this debate multiple times in this country, and it seems over the years everybody has always come to the consensus that this shouldn't be criminal. Treating it as criminal offence is not a good way of dealing with it, and yet we continue to pursue that path.
Absolutely, and then the question is, let's look at the people who are most likely going to be criminalised. Who are those likely victims? Is it people who are already have multiple issues they're dealing with, multiple health issues, multiple mental health issues. Are we then going to turn those people into criminals? And I think this is much more a health issue that needs a wider, more robust debate than criminalising.
Yeah, those who deal it, though, apparently would, instead of getting 14 years, they would get life. Is that a good thing?
I think this needs to come back to a health debate, firstly.
That's the dealers, not the people who are...
Prison's already full, aren't they?
Exactly.
Oh, I'm just putting her argument forward. That's not my person.
I'm just asking whether or not...
Well, I think we
just
can, in some sense, I don't think that we can isolate one group from the other. We need to look at this as look at the questions, why, what's going on here, and let's look at it robustly before we begin this whole criminalisation.
Well, she says it would send a cultural and political signal that it is unacceptable if they were to be upgraded to...
I do agree that there needs to come to a place where we are looking at taking a hard stance on drugs, because there are people's lives who are devastated by drugs, and I do think there needs to be, especially young people, especially vulnerable groups. When we think about the whole county lines, young people who are lured into this thing, you don't ever get the big guys. You only get those people who are lured. And if you look at the demography, those young people who are usually pulled into this, there's always multiple reasons why. Some of them are funding their entire families, and that's why it's not as simple as criminalization. It's about, let's look at the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, it's an argument with a nuanced argument, isn't it? Tessie, thanks, and Nigel, thank you to you as well. More from them in the next hour. And do let us know, by the way, if you think that cannabis should be classified or reclassified as a Class A drug. GBViews at gbnews.uk. We'll be talking about that later on in the programme.
Yes, it's coming up to 10 to 7. In fact, it is 10 to